Jake Morrison stood at the wide window of his new room and looked out at the strange purple sky of Centauri Prime. 3 moons hung in the air like giant pearls, and the buildings below glowed with soft blue light. He had been dreaming of this moment for years, but now that he was here, everything felt unreal. The Galactic Academy of Sciences was the most important school in known space. Students came from 12 different worlds to study here. Jake was the first human ever chosen to attend. Earth had only joined the galactic community 5 years ago, and most aliens still thought humans were not very smart. Jake touched the wall of his room and felt the smooth crystal surface. Everything here was made of some kind of living crystal that grew into whatever shape was needed. His bed was a crystal platform that somehow knew exactly how soft or firm he liked it. The walls could become transparent or solid with just a thought. Even the floor adjusted to the perfect temperature for his feet, but the thing that bothered Jake most was the food dispenser in the corner. It looked like a metal box with a small door. When he pressed the button, it made a humming sound and produced a gray paste in a bowl. The paste had all the nutrients his body needed, according to the machine, but it tasted like cardboard mixed with chalk. Jake had tried the paste for 3 days now. Each time, he forced himself to eat it, telling himself he needed to adapt to alien ways. But his stomach growled constantly, and he found himself thinking about real food all the time. He missed the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of bacon cooking in a pan, and the simple pleasure of eating something that actually had flavor. On his first day, Jake had met his neighbors in the dormitory wing. To his right lived Zik 741. A Centauri student who looked like a tall, thin tree with silver bark and leaves that changed color with his mood. Centauri did not eat food at all. They absorbed energy directly from light, like plants on Earth. Zik 741 spent several hours each day, standing perfectly still under special lamps that provided the right kind of energy for his species. To his left, Lived Quinn, a Vexary who resembled a blue jellyfish floating in a clear tank filled with liquid. Vexary consumed nutrients by filtering special chemicals through their skin. Quinn's tank was connected to a complex system of tubes that delivered different colored liquids throughout the day. Across the hall lived Krex, a Krillian who looked like a large rock with arms and legs. Krillians ate minerals and metals, crunching through iron bars and granite chunks like humans might eat crackers. Krex kept a pile of colorful stones in his room that he snacked on between classes. Jake had tried to explain human eating habits to his new friends, but they seemed confused by the concept. When he told them that humans heated their food before eating it, Zik 741's leaves turned a worried orange color. When he mentioned that humans ate both plants and animals, Quinn's blue skin became pale with shock. And when he described the variety of flavors and textures humans enjoyed, Krex just stared at him with his small black eyes and asked if humans were trying to torture themselves. The classes at the academy were fascinating but exhausting. Jake spent his days learning about quantum physics from professors who existed in multiple dimensions at once, studying alien biology from teachers who could change their shape at will, and practicing advanced mathematics with instructors whose brains were literally computers. But by the end of each day, Jake felt drained and homesick. The gray paste from the food dispenser did nothing to lift his spirits. He found himself staring at pictures of Earth food on his personal communicator, remembering the taste of his mother's pancakes and his father's grilled hamburgers. On the third night, Jake made a decision. He activated his room's communication system and sent a message to the Academy's supply department. The request was simple. He wanted to receive a shipment of Earth food items and a small cooking device. As a student, he was allowed to request special materials for personal use. As long as they were not dangerous, the response came back within an hour. Supply Coordinator Venth9, a mechanical being who managed all shipments to the Academy, approved his request without question. Different species had different nutritional needs, the message explained, and the Academy was happy to accommodate special dietary requirements. Jake submitted a detailed list: fresh eggs, bacon, bread, butter, coffee beans, salt, pepper, and a small portable electric cooking unit that could heat food safely. He also requested a coffee maker and some basic cooking tools. The shipment would arrive in 2 days. For the first time since arriving at the academy, Jake fell asleep with a smile on his face. The next 2 days dragged by slowly. Jake attended his classes and tried to focus on his studies, but his mind kept wandering to thoughts of real food. His alien classmates noticed his improved mood and asked what had changed, but Jake just told them he was getting used to life at the academy. During xenobiology class, Professor Veltar, a Krillian with dark green stone skin and glowing yellow eyes, was explaining the feeding habits of different species. Jake listened with new interest as the professor described how each species had evolved different ways to obtain nutrition. The key to understanding any species, Professor Veltar said in his deep, rumbling voice, is to understand how they obtain and process energy. This fundamental need shapes everything about their biology, their culture, and their technology. Jake raised his hand. Professor, what about species that modify their food before consuming it? The class fell silent. Professor Veltar's eyes dimmed slightly, which Jake had learned was a sign of confusion in Krillians. Modify food? The professor asked. Do you mean like the Veshan practice of aging nutrients in special containers? Not exactly, Jake said. Carefully. I mean using heat or other processes to change the structure of food before eating it. Several students turned to stare at Jake. Zik 741's leaves turned bright yellow, which meant he was very curious. Quinn's skin rippled with patterns that Jake could not read. Even Krex leaned forward, his stone fingers clicking against his desk. That would be extremely dangerous, Professor Veltar said slowly. Applying heat to organic matter would destroy many of the essential compounds needed for nutrition. Why would any species risk such damage to their food supply? Jake realized he had said too much. I was just wondering about theoretical possibilities. He said quickly. The professor nodded, but his glowing eyes remained focused on Jake for the rest of the class. That evening, Jake received notification that his shipment had arrived. He hurried to the supply depot, a massive crystalline warehouse filled with floating platforms that carried packages to their destinations. Supply Coordinator Venth9, who looked like a silver spider with too many legs, handed Jake a sealed container about the size of a small refrigerator. Unusual request, Venth9 said in a mechanical voice. Organic compounds, thermal processing device, and liquid extraction equipment. May I ask the purpose? Personal nutrition requirements, Jake said, trying to sound casual. Ah yes, Venth9 replied. Species diversity makes the galaxy interesting. Enjoy your dietary supplements, human Jake Morrison. Jake carried the container back to his room, his heart beating faster with excitement. Tomorrow morning, he would have a real breakfast for the first time in days. He had no idea that this simple meal would soon turn the entire academy upside down and change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. As he placed the container in his room and began unpacking its contents, Jake felt truly happy for the first time since leaving Earth. The familiar sight of coffee beans and the weight of fresh eggs in his hands made him feel connected to home again. Tomorrow would be a good day. Jake woke up early the next morning, feeling more excited than he had in weeks. The 3 moons of Centauri Prime were still visible in the purple sky, but the artificial lights in the academy were beginning to brighten to signal the start of a new day. Jake stretched and looked at the container of Earth food sitting on his desk. Today he would finally have a real breakfast. He opened the container and pulled out each item carefully. The eggs were still fresh, kept cold during the long journey. From Earth, the bacon was wrapped in special packaging that had preserved it perfectly. The coffee beans smelled rich and dark, just like the ones from his favorite shop back home. Jake smiled as he held each familiar item, feeling a connection to his world that the gray paste from the food dispenser could never provide. Jake set up the small cooking unit on his desk. It was a simple device that could heat food safely without producing smoke or dangerous gases. He plugged it into the room's power system and watched as a small green light indicated it was ready to use. The coffee maker was next, a compact machine that could brew a single cup at a time. The walls of the dormitory were thin, designed to allow the crystal structure to grow and change as needed. Jake knew that sounds could travel easily between rooms, but he had never thought about how the smells of cooking food might spread through the building. As he began to prepare his breakfast, he had no idea that his simple meal would soon attract the attention of everyone around him. Jake started by heating the cooking surface to the right temperature. The small unit hummed quietly as it warmed. Up, he cracked the first egg into a bowl, then another, watching as the clear liquid and yellow centers mixed together. The familiar sound of eggs being stirred brought back memories of weekend mornings at home with his family. In the room next door, Zik 741 was beginning his morning energy absorption routine. The Zentari had arranged his special lamps in a circle and was about to begin his daily feeding when something unusual caught his attention. His sensitive chemical detection organs, which were located in his silver leaves, picked up strange new compounds in the air. 741 froze in place, his leaves turning a deep purple color that indicated alarm. The chemical signatures he was detecting were unlike anything in his extensive database of safe Academy substances. There were proteins undergoing rapid molecular changes, lipids being subjected to extreme heat, and complex organic compounds breaking down and reforming in ways that suggested dangerous chemical reactions. Meanwhile, Jake poured the beaten eggs into the heated cooking surface. The eggs began to sizzle immediately, turning from clear liquid to solid white as the proteins changed their structure. Jake smiled at the familiar sound and began to stir the eggs gently, watching them form soft, fluffy curds. The sound of sizzling food was completely foreign to the aliens in the dormitory. None of their feeding methods produced noise. When Zentari absorbed energy, it was silent. When Vexari filtered nutrients, it was barely audible. When Krillian ate minerals, they made crunching sounds, but nothing like the continuous crackling and popping that was now coming from Jake's room. Jake opened the bacon package and laid several strips on another section of the cooking surface. The bacon began to cook immediately, producing even more dramatic sounds as the fat rendered and the meat began to crisp. The rich, smoky aroma filled Jake's room and began to seep through the walls into the hallway. Across the hall, Krex was trying to focus on his morning meal of iron pellets when the strange smells reached his room. Krillian had excellent chemical sensors that helped them identify different minerals and metals in their environment. But the compounds now flooding the air were organic, complex, and completely unfamiliar. Krex's sensors indicated that massive molecular breakdown was occurring somewhere nearby, possibly indicating a dangerous chemical accident. In the room to Jake's left, Quinn was floating peacefully in his tank, filtering his morning nutrients through his skin when the water in his tank began to vibrate slightly. The vibrations were caused by the sounds coming from Jake's room, but to Quinn they felt like seismic activity. Vexari were extremely sensitive to environmental changes, and the combination of strange vibrations and unknown chemical compounds in the water triggered all of his survival instincts. Jake, completely unaware of the panic he was causing, continued his breakfast preparation. He flipped the bacon strips, enjoying the way they curled and browned. The eggs were nearly done, soft and creamy, just the way he liked them. He put 2 slices of bread into the small toaster attachment and began to prepare his coffee. The coffee maker gurgled to life, producing a series of bubbling and hissing sounds as hot water passed through the ground beans. The aroma of fresh coffee was perhaps the most shocking smell to the aliens in the building. Coffee contains hundreds of different chemical compounds, many of which were completely unknown to non-human species. To them, it smelled like a complex chemical weapon. Now, several other students in the dormitory had noticed the disturbance. A Veshan student named Kira 7, who lived 3 rooms down, had called the Academy's emergency services to report what she believed was a chemical fire. 2 Vexari students had evacuated their rooms and were floating in the hallway, their skin flashing with warning colors. Jake buttered his toast and plated his eggs and bacon. The simple meal looked perfect to him. Golden eggs, crispy bacon, and warm toast with melted butter. He poured his coffee into a mug and added a little cream, watching it swirl into the dark liquid. The smell was incredible, rich and complex. And comforting. He was about to take his first bite when he heard a soft knocking at his door. Jake set down his fork and walked to the door, expecting to see one of his neighbors stopping by to chat. Instead, he found himself facing a small crowd of alien students, all staring at him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to outright terror. Zik 741 was in front, his leaves now bright orange with concern. Behind him stood Quinn, his blue skin pale and rippling with nervous patterns. Krex was there too, his stone face showing more emotion than Jake had ever seen from him. Several other students Jake recognized from his classes were also present, whispering to each other in their various languages. "Jake Morrison," Zik 741 said in his musical voice, "are you experiencing a medical emergency? We detected massive chemical reactions coming from your room." Jake blinked in confusion. "Chemical reactions? No, I'm just having breakfast." The crowd of aliens exchanged glances. Quinn's skin turned almost white. "Breakfast?" he asked in his watery voice. "You mean the gray paste from the nutrition dispenser?" "No," Jake said, still not understanding why everyone seemed so worried. "I mean real food. I'm eating eggs and bacon and drinking coffee." The hallway fell silent. Even the normal background humming of the Academy system seemed to quiet down. Jake realized that something was very wrong, but he could not figure out what. Professor Veltar appeared at the end of the hallway, his heavy footsteps echoing on the crystal floor. The Krillian professor's glowing eyes were brighter than usual, which Jake had learned meant he was either very interested or very concerned about something. "What is the nature of this disturbance?" Professor Veltar asked in his deep, rumbling voice. "The human claims to be consuming something called eggs and bacon," Zik 741 explained, his leaves now flashing between orange and red. "Our senses indicate massive thermal and chemical processing of organic compounds." Professor Veltar's eyes grew even brighter. He stepped closer to Jake, his stone nostrils flaring as he tried to identify the strange smells coming from the room. "Student Morrison, are you saying that you deliberately applied heat to organic matter before consuming it?" Jake nodded slowly, beginning to understand that what seemed normal to him was apparently shocking to everyone else. "Yes, sir. That's how humans prepare food." The professor's expression changed from concern to fascination. "Fascinating. And you are not experiencing any negative effects from this process?" "No, sir. I feel great. Better than I have since I got here." Professor Veltar turned to address the gathered students. "Everyone return to your rooms. This is not an emergency. However, I believe we may have discovered something very interesting about human biology." As the crowd slowly dispersed, Jake stood in his doorway holding his plate of food, finally understanding that his simple breakfast had somehow become the most unusual thing anyone at the Academy had ever seen. He looked down at his eggs and bacon, still warm and delicious, and wondered what would happen next. Within an hour of Jake's breakfast incident, news of the event had spread throughout the entire Academy. Students whispered in hallways about the human who had performed dangerous chemical experiments in his room. Professors canceled their morning classes to discuss this unprecedented situation. Even the Academy's artificial intelligence system had flagged Jake's activities as requiring immediate investigation. Jake sat in his room, his breakfast growing cold on his plate. He had managed to eat a few bites before Professor Veltar had asked him to remain in his quarters until further notice. The eggs still tasted perfect, but Jake found it hard to enjoy his meal while wondering what kind of trouble he might be. And Dean Mordek, the highest-ranking official at the Academy, received an emergency report while he was reviewing applications from new student candidates. The dean was a Zentari, like Zik 741, but much older and larger. His silver bark was marked with intricate patterns that showed his age and wisdom. His leaves, normally a calm blue color, turned deep purple as he read the report. The document described Jake's activities in scientific terms that made them sound extremely dangerous. Thermal application to protein structures. Deliberate molecular breakdown of organic compounds. Consumption of chemically altered matter. Chemical weapon-like aromatics dispersed through atmospheric systems. The report concluded that either the human was attempting suicide, or Earth had sent a dangerous individual to the Academy. Dean Mordek immediately called an emergency meeting of the Academy's senior faculty. Within 30 minutes, the main conference room was filled with the most brilliant minds from 12 different worlds. The room itself was a marvel of engineering, with environmental controls that allowed different species to exist comfortably in the same space. Special atmospheric zones provided the right air for each species, while gravity fields could be adjusted for different physiological needs. Professor Veltar was the first to speak. His deep voice echoed through the room as he described what he had witnessed. The human deliberately applied extreme heat to organic matter, causing irreversible molecular changes. Then he consumed the altered substances with no apparent ill effects. His vital signs remained completely normal throughout the process. Dr. Cathara, the Academy's leading biochemist, was a Veshan who looked like a large butterfly with metallic wings and compound eyes. She had been studying human biology since Earth joined the galactic community, but this report challenged everything she thought she knew about human physiology. "This is impossible," Dr. Cathara said, her wings fluttering. Nervously, thermal processing destroys essential nutrients. It breaks down proteins into unusable fragments. It creates toxic compounds that should poison any living being. How can humans not only survive this process, but apparently thrive on it? Commander Zeth, the Academy's security chief, was a mechanical being whose body was made of living metal. His sensors could detect the smallest traces of dangerous substances, and he had been monitoring the situation since the first reports came in. "My analysis confirms the professor's observations. The human created dozens of compounds that do not exist in nature. Some of these compounds are similar to industrial solvents. Others resemble materials used in advanced manufacturing processes." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dean Mordek's leaves shifted through several colors before settling on a worried orange. "Are we suggesting that humans routinely consume industrial chemicals for nutrition?" "It appears so," Dr. Cathara replied. "But the truly puzzling aspect is that this process seems to improve their nutritional intake rather than harm it. My preliminary analysis suggests that the thermal processing actually makes certain nutrients more accessible to human digestive systems." Professor Yikstal, a vexillary expert in evolutionary biology, floated in his portable tank at one end of the table. His blue skin was rippling with complex patterns that indicated deep thought. "Perhaps we should consider the possibility that humans are far more advanced than we assumed. What if this apparent destruction of food is actually a sophisticated form of predigestion?" The suggestion caused another wave of discussion throughout the room. The idea that humans might be more advanced than the other galactic species was almost unthinkable. Earth had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their technology seemed primitive compared to the crystal-based systems used by most advanced civilizations. Their society was still divided into separate nations that sometimes fought with each other, but the evidence was difficult to ignore. Humans had somehow developed a method of nutritional processing that appeared to be more efficient than anything known to galactic science. They were essentially performing chemistry in their kitchens that other species required laboratory equipment to achieve. Dean Mordek made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "We need to understand this process completely. I'm calling for a full scientific investigation. We will ask Student Morrison to demonstrate his food preparation methods under controlled laboratory conditions." Dr. Cathara's wings fluttered. "Again, Dean, if this process is as dangerous as it appears, should we not contact Earth Command first? Perhaps this human is malfunctioning in some way. Maybe he needs medical attention." "That is possible," the Dean replied. "But I suspect we are about to learn something very important about human biology. Something that will change how we view Earth and its people." Professor Veltar stood up, his massive stone body casting shadows across the room. "I volunteer to oversee the investigation. If humans have developed advanced nutritional chemistry, we need to understand it immediately. This could revolutionize how every species approaches the problem of sustenance. Commander Zeth's mechanical voice added another concern. We should also consider the security implications. If humans can routinely perform complex chemistry with simple equipment, what else might they be capable of? Their technology may be more sophisticated than we realized. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from the communications center. The Academy's long-range sensors had detected incoming transmissions from 12 different worlds. News of the humans' breakfast had somehow leaked beyond the Academy, and scientific institutions across the galaxy were requesting more information. Dean Mordek realized that the situation was spiraling beyond his control. What had started as a simple dormitory incident was now becoming a matter of galactic importance. He needed to handle this carefully to avoid causing panic or misunderstanding between species. We will proceed with the investigation, the Dean announced. But we will also implement full information security protocols. No details about this incident are to be shared outside this room until we understand what we are dealing with. As the meeting broke up, professors and administrators hurried to their departments to begin preparations for what would be the most unusual scientific demonstration in the Academy's history. Equipment was requisitioned from multiple laboratories. Safety protocols were reviewed and updated. Environmental systems were checked and double-checked to ensure they could handle whatever chemical processes the human might produce. Meanwhile, Jake sat in his room completely unaware that his simple breakfast had triggered a galaxy-wide scientific crisis. He had finished his eggs and bacon, despite them being cold, and was working on an assignment for his quantum physics class. The coffee had gone cold too, but it still tasted better than anything the nutrition dispenser could produce. A soft chime from his door indicated that someone wanted to speak with him. Jake opened the door to find Professor Veltar standing in the hallway, accompanied by Dr. Cathara and two other faculty members he did not recognize. Student Morrison, Professor Veltar said in his formal voice, the Academy's senior faculty, would like to request your assistance with a scientific investigation. Jake blinked in surprise. An investigation? Into what? Dr. Cathara stepped forward, her metallic wings catching the light from the hallway illumination. We would like you to demonstrate your food preparation methods under laboratory conditions. The scientific community is very interested in understanding human nutritional processes. Jake looked at the serious expressions on the faces around him and realized that his breakfast had somehow become much more important than he had thought. You want me to cook food for you? In a manner of speaking, yes, Professor Veltar replied. We believe that what you call cooking may represent a significant advancement in applied biochemistry. Jake nodded slowly, still not fully understanding what was happening, but willing to help. Okay, when do you want me to do this? Tomorrow morning, Dr. Cathara said. We need time to prepare the appropriate safety measures and monitoring equipment. As the faculty members walked away, Jake closed his door and sat back down at his desk. He had no idea that his demonstration would soon be broadcast to scientific institutions across 12 worlds, or that the simple act of making scrambled eggs and bacon would fundamentally change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The next morning, Jake woke up to find his room surrounded by Academy security personnel. Through his crystal wall, he could see floating platforms carrying scientific equipment toward the main laboratory complex. The normally quiet hallways buzzed with activity as faculty members hurried back and forth, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic beeps. Jake dressed quickly and gathered his cooking supplies. He had been instructed to bring everything he had used for his breakfast the day before. As he packed the eggs, bacon, bread, and coffee into a carrying case, he wondered why such a simple demonstration required so much preparation. Commander Zeth appeared at his door exactly at the scheduled time. The mechanical being's metal body reflected the hallway lights as he spoke in his precise electronic voice. Student Morrison, please follow me to Laboratory Complex 7. The faculty is ready to begin the demonstration. As they walked through the Academy corridors, Jake noticed that many students had gathered along the route. They whispered among themselves and pointed at him as he passed. Some looked curious. Others appeared frightened. and a few seemed excited to witness what many were calling the most important scientific event in recent galactic history. Laboratory Complex 7 was the Academy's largest research facility. It had been designed to handle experiments with dangerous materials and unknown phenomena. The main chamber was enormous, with walls made of transparent aluminum that could withstand massive explosions. Environmental systems could adjust to any atmospheric composition, and emergency protocols could evacuate the entire area in seconds if something went wrong. When Jake entered the laboratory, he stopped in amazement. The room was filled with more scientific equipment than he had ever seen in one place. Sensors hung from the ceiling like metallic spiders. Computer displays lined the walls, showing streams of data in languages he could not read. A dozen different species of faculty members stood behind protective barriers, all focused on a small cooking station that had been set up in the center of the room. The cooking station looked tiny compared to all the equipment surrounding it. Jake's simple cooking unit sat on a metal table, connected to so many monitoring devices that he could barely see the actual cooking surface. The coffee maker was similarly surrounded by sensors and measuring instruments. Dean Morduck stood at the main control panel, his silver leaves shifting between blue and purple as he monitored the readings from dozens of different systems. When he saw Jake enter, his leaves turned a more confident green color. "Student Morrison," the dean announced, his voice amplified throughout the laboratory. "We are ready to begin. Please proceed with your normal food preparation routine. Do not be concerned about the equipment around you. Simply prepare your breakfast as you would in your room." Jake nodded and walked to the cooking station. The protective gear he had been asked to wear felt strange and bulky. The clear helmet made everything look distorted, and the thick gloves made it harder to handle his cooking tools. But the faculty had insisted that safety protocols be followed, even though Jake had explained repeatedly that cooking was not dangerous. Dr. Kethara's voice came through the laboratory's communication system. "All monitoring systems are active. We are recording molecular composition, thermal dynamics, chemical reactions, and atmospheric changes. Proceed when ready." Jake took a deep breath and began his demonstration. He turned on the cooking unit and waited for it to heat up. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the laboratory. Red lights flashed on several control panels, and automated safety systems activated containment fields around the cooking area. "Temperature spike detected," announced the laboratory's artificial intelligence system. "Thermal levels approaching industrial processing ranges." Professor Valtar's voice boomed over the alarms. "All systems normal. Continue the demonstration." Jake cracked his first egg into a bowl, trying to ignore the chaos around him. The simple sound of the eggshell breaking was picked up by acoustic sensors and analyzed by computer systems that immediately identified it as controlled structural failure of calcium carbonate matrix. When Jake beat the eggs with a fork, the monitoring equipment detected rapid molecular agitation and protein chain disruption. Several graduate students watching from the observation deck gasped in amazement as their instruments showed the eggs transforming at the molecular level. Jake poured the beaten eggs onto the heated cooking surface. The sizzling sound that followed was unlike anything most of the observers had ever heard. To them, it sounded like a controlled explosion happening in slow motion. The sensors detecting the chemical changes in the eggs showed cascading transformations that looked like a complex industrial process. Dr. Kethara's wings fluttered rapidly as she watched her instruments. "Impossible," she whispered. "The human is performing controlled protein denaturation using precise thermal application. This is biochemistry that should require laboratory conditions." Meanwhile, Jake added the bacon to the cooking surface. The fat began to render immediately, creating new compounds that the monitoring systems had never encountered before. The smell that filled the laboratory was carefully analyzed by atmospheric sensors, which identified over 200 different chemical compounds, many of which were completely unknown to galactic science. Professor Yickstall, floating in his observation tank, was frantically taking notes. His blue skin rippled with patterns that indicated extreme excitement. "Look at the efficiency of this process," he called out to his colleagues. "The human is extracting maximum nutritional value while simultaneously improving digestibility and flavor compounds. Jake flipped his eggs and turned the bacon, completely focused on his cooking despite the scientific chaos around him. To him, this was just breakfast. But to the assembled faculty, he was demonstrating mastery of chemistry that challenged their understanding of what was possible for biological beings to achieve. The coffee preparation caused even more excitement. When Jake ground the coffee beans, the release of aromatic compounds triggered every atmospheric sensor in the laboratory. The brewing process, with hot water extracting complex molecules from the ground beans, looked to the alien scientists like the most sophisticated chemical extraction they had ever witnessed. He is creating a liquid that contains stimulants, antioxidants, and flavor compounds in perfect balance, Dr. Cathara announced. This is pharmaceutical-level precision using primitive equipment. As Jake's breakfast neared completion, the laboratory fell silent except for the humming of monitoring equipment and the gentle sizzling of food. The faculty members watched in amazement as Jake plated his eggs and bacon, toasted his bread, and poured his coffee. The simple meal looked exactly like what he had prepared in his room the day before, but then came the moment that shocked everyone the most. Jake removed his protective helmet and sat down at the small table that had been provided. Without any hesitation, he began to eat his breakfast. The monitoring equipment showed that Jake's vital signs remained perfectly normal as he consumed what the aliens viewed as a complex mixture of industrial chemicals. His digestive system processed the thermally altered proteins without any sign of distress. His nervous system responded positively to the stimulants in the coffee. Even his immune system showed no signs of detecting the meal as foreign or dangerous. Commander Zeth's mechanical voice broke the silence. Analysis complete. The human has successfully consumed the altered organic matter with no negative effects. In fact, his biological efficiency appears to have improved. Dr. Cathara stared at her instruments in disbelief. His metabolism has increased by 12%. His brain activity is more focused. His muscle tension has decreased. The consumption of thermally processed organic matter has actually enhanced his physical performance. Jake finished his breakfast and looked up at the gathered faculty. "That was delicious," he said simply. "Thank you for letting me have real food again." The laboratory erupted in excited discussion. Faculty members from different species clustered around their instruments, sharing data and theories. The implications of what they had witnessed were staggering. Dean Morduk's leaves had turned bright gold, indicating extreme interest and excitement. "Student Morrison," he announced, "you have just demonstrated capabilities that we did not know were possible. We need to understand how your species developed these abilities." Jake stood up and removed the rest of his protective gear. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what's so special about cooking breakfast. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years." The room fell silent again. Professor Veltar's glowing eyes dimmed as he processed this information. "Thousands of years?" he asked slowly. "Sure," Jake replied. "Cooking is one of the most basic human skills. We learn it as children." Dr. Cathara's wings stopped fluttering entirely. "You mean that all humans can perform this level of biochemical manipulation?" Jake nodded. "Every human knows how to cook something. Most of us cook every day." The realization hit the assembled faculty like a physical force. Earth was not a primitive world populated by simple beings. It was a planet of 8 billion individuals who routinely performed advanced chemistry as part of their daily lives. The news of Jake's breakfast demonstration spread across the galaxy faster than anyone thought possible. Within hours, every major scientific institution from the core worlds to the outer rim had received detailed reports about humanity's incredible abilities. Research teams that had been studying other projects immediately dropped everything to focus on human nutritional chemistry. On the planet Desha, Dr. Morville had been working on molecular food synthesis for 30 years. When she received the data from the Academy, she realized that humans had solved problems that had stumped her entire career. They were creating complex flavor compounds through simple thermal application that her laboratory could only produce using million-credit equipment, the Krillian Science Collective, known throughout the galaxy for their expertise in chemical engineering, called an emergency session. For generations, they had believed their mineral-based diet was the most efficient form of nutrition possible. The revelation that humans could extract more energy and nutrients from organic matter through cooking challenged everything they thought. They knew about biochemistry. Even the ancient Centauri Council, which had been studying energy absorption for thousands of years, was forced to reconsider their understanding of nutrition. If humans could improve the quality of their food through thermal processing, perhaps there were other methods of enhancement that had never been explored. Back at the academy, Jake tried to return to his normal routine but found it impossible. His quantum physics professor spent the entire class asking questions about human chemistry instead of teaching about particle interactions. His xenobiology instructor canceled the planned lesson to discuss human digestive systems. Even his mathematics class turned into a discussion about the chemical equations involved in cooking. The other students treated Jake like a celebrity. Zik 741 asked him to explain every step of the cooking process in scientific terms, even though Jake insisted he was just following recipes his grandmother had taught him. Quinn wanted to know if humans could teach other species to perform thermal food processing. Krex kept asking if humans could cook minerals and metals to make them more nutritious. 3 days after the demonstration, Dean Morduck received a priority message from the Galactic Council headquarters. The Council, which governed relations between all spacefaring species, was calling an emergency session to discuss the implications of human cooking abilities. Jake was formally requested to attend as Earth's representative. The invitation came with a warning that shocked even Dean Morduck. The message explained that several worlds were already considering changing their entire approach to food production based on preliminary reports about human thermal processing. The economic implications were staggering. If cooking could make food more nutritious and flavorful, it could revolutionize agriculture, nutrition science, and even medical treatment across dozens of worlds. Jake found himself aboard a diplomatic transport ship heading toward Council Station, the massive space habitat where the galaxy's leaders met to make important decisions. The ship's captain, a mechanical being similar to Commander Zeth, treated Jake with a respect normally reserved for heads of state. During the journey, Jake was briefed by Dr. Cathara, who had been assigned as his scientific advisor. She explained that the council session would determine humanity's new status in the galactic community. The discovery that humans possessed advanced biochemical abilities had implications far beyond simple food preparation. "You must understand," Dr. Cathara said, her metallic wings reflecting the ship's lights. "We originally classified Earth as a developing world because your technology appeared primitive. But if every human can perform complex chemistry as part of their daily routine, we may have severely underestimated your species' capabilities." Jake stared out at the stars rushing past the ship's windows. But cooking isn't advanced chemistry. It's just basic survival. Every species must have some way to prepare food. "That is where you are wrong," Dr. Cathara replied. "Most species consume their nutrition in its natural state. The idea of deliberately changing food before eating it is almost unknown in the galaxy. Only a few species perform any kind of food processing, and they use technology that costs millions of credits and requires years of training to operate safely." The council station was the largest artificial structure Jake had ever seen. It was home to representatives from 47 different species and contained diplomatic facilities, research laboratories, and cultural centers from across the galaxy. The main council chamber could accommodate thousands of beings and environments suited to their specific biological needs. When Jake entered the chamber, he found himself facing the most diverse gathering of intelligent life in the galaxy. There were crystalline beings that communicated through light patterns, gas-based entities that existed in specialized containment fields, and mechanical intelligences that had evolved from ancient computer systems. All of them were focused on understanding what humans could do with simple cooking equipment. Counselor Prime Veleneth An ancient Zentari whose silver bark was covered in complex patterns representing centuries of wisdom, called the session to order. His voice carried through the chamber's translation systems, reaching every species in their own language. "We have gathered to discuss the recent discoveries about human capabilities," Counselor Prime Velenith announced. "The implications of these findings may require us to reconsider humanity's classification and status within our community." Dr. Kethara presented the scientific findings to the assembled council. Her report included detailed chemical analyses, video recordings of Jake's cooking demonstration, and projections about how human techniques might be applied to other species' nutrition needs. The data was overwhelming in its implications. "Human thermal food processing," she explained, "represents a level of practical chemistry that we previously thought impossible for biological beings to perform without extensive technological assistance. Yet humans routinely accomplish these transformations, using simple tools and techniques passed down through their culture for thousands of years." The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives from different worlds debated the findings. Some argued that humans had been deliberately hiding their advanced capabilities. Others suggested that human abilities indicated a level of evolutionary development that surpassed many supposedly more advanced species. Jake was asked to address the council directly, standing at the center of the massive chamber, surrounded by beings from across the galaxy. He felt overwhelmed by the responsibility placed on him. He had never considered himself a representative of humanity, and certainly not an expert on human abilities. "Honored council members," Jake began, his voice amplified throughout the chamber, "I think there may be some misunderstanding about what humans can do. Cooking is not advanced science for us, it is something we learn as children. Most humans know how to prepare many different kinds of food using various methods." This statement caused another wave of excited discussion. The idea that human children were taught complex chemistry as a basic life skill was almost unbelievable. To species that required advanced education to understand molecular interactions, Counselor Zrikdom of the Krillian Science Collective stood to address Jake directly. "Student Morrison, you say that most humans possess these abilities. Can you estimate what percentage of your species can perform thermal food processing?" Jake thought for a moment. "Nearly all of us, sir. Maybe 95% or more. The only humans who can't cook are very young children or people with certain medical conditions." The chamber fell silent. The implications were staggering. Earth was home to 8 billion beings, almost all of whom could perform chemistry that impressed the galaxy's finest scientists. From the Council's perspective, humanity was not a developing species with primitive technology. They were a planet of natural chemists who had somehow made advanced molecular manipulation look effortless. Counselor Prime Velenith called for a formal vote. The motion before the council was simple but revolutionary. Reclassify Earth from a developing world to an advanced civilization, with full membership rights and access to all galactic technologies and knowledge. The vote was unanimous. As the session concluded, Jake realized that his simple breakfast had accidentally revealed humanity's greatest strength. Humans had a unique ability to solve complex problems through practical application, then make those solutions seem so natural that they forgot how remarkable they were. 6 months later, Jake returned to Earth as a hero, though he still insisted he had done nothing special. The Galactic Council had established the first interspecies culinary institute on Earth, where beings from across the galaxy came to learn human cooking techniques. What humans called recipes were studied as advanced chemical procedures by alien scientists. Jake's grandmother, who had taught him to cook, became the institute's first director. When reporters asked her about humanity's amazing abilities, she just smiled and said that good food brought people together. No matter what planet they came from, the galaxy had learned an important lesson from Jake's breakfast. Sometimes the most extraordinary achievements look like the most ordinary activities.